Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sharpening the Saw. Today's theme is psychological and psychosocial safety, the two layers of high performance culture. As AI, hybrid work, and constant change redefine the workplace, one question stands out. Can organizations truly achieve high performance if people don't feel safe, not just to speak up, but to thrive? In this episode, we'll explore why psychological and psychosocial safety are becoming essential leadership priorities for building resilient, innovative, and high performing organizations. We would also love to hear your perspective. Share your questions or insights with us on LinkedIn and we'll respond to them. Now, to lead today's conversation, I would like to welcome our host, Neelakshi Mukherjee, Senior Director at PeopleFirst Ltd, a seasoned leadership facilitator and executive coach with over 30 years of global experience. Neelakshi has led large-scale people transformations, including her role as head of HR at Purpose. Her expertise spans leadership development, succession planning, and talent nurturing across industries and geographies. Through her work, she has helped organizations build high potential leaders, strengthen teams, and create cultures that enable performance and growth. Blending deep strategic insight with hands on coaching experience, she brings a powerful and practical perspective to leadership, making her uniquely positioned to lead a conversation that goes beyond theory into real world relevance. Now, I would like to welcome our guest for today, Dorothy Dalton, founder of 3 Plus International and an international talent management strategist focused on building inclusive and high performance teams. An executive coach and workplace culture expert, she supports individuals and organizations in creating environments where people can thrive. With a background of spanning international business, trauma informed HR leadership, and coaching, Dorothy brings a distinctive perspective that covers psychological and psychosocial safety through human centered leadership. Her work integrates evidence based approaches to leadership development with the Japanese philosophy of Ikigai, guiding people build meaningful careers while enabling organizations to develop inclusive, resilient cultures. She's a recognized voice on workplace trauma, harassment prevention, the future of work, and the changing expectations of today's workforce. Through coaching, speaking, writing, and training, Dorothy challenges conventional thinking and encourages leaders to create workplaces where trust, belonging, and performance reinforce one another. So now, let's begin with today's conversation. Over to you, Neelakshi.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us, Dorothy. And thank you, Shagufta, for this wonderful introductions. That was very humbling and so kind of you. Dorothy, as I was mentioning earlier, I was waiting for this day to happen because I have seen a lot of your work. I have seen the stuff you do. And it so resonates with what's going on today, right? What's going on at the corporates today? What's going on in life today, right? I mean, are we even psychologically safe at home is sometimes what I really tend to ask myself. But sticking to the agenda, we've heard of psychological safety very often in various forums. But what particularly drew me to what you say, Dorothy, is about psychosocial safety. So tell me, how is it different? How is it different? What is the perspective you want to bring on the table for that?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me and thank you for agreeing to include psychosocial safety because I think frequently in the West, particularly, we focus on psychological safety, but without understanding that unless you have psychosocial safety, psychological safety won't work. So just for people who want a basic understanding, psychological safety is a concept introduced by Harvard professor Amy Edmondson. And it's the facility and the ability to be able to speak up in your place of work without fear of reprisals. Right. And it gets confused with people thinking they can say anything they want. It's not that, but it's about feeling that you can speak up. And psychosocial safety is the framework in which that takes place. So psychosocial safety is about your physical environment, the organization, and the social element. So it is completely possible to have a psychologically safe team with a manager that creates psychological safety, but you can be in an organization that isn't socially safe, and that can be problematic.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I like the analogy that you got, that as a manager, I could be making you feel psychologically safe, but it is not a given that the organization at large would be psychosocially safe for me. That's a wonderful analogy, and I'm sure my audience gets to understand the distinct difference. But tell me something, Dorothy, can an employee genuinely experience psychological safety or psychosocial safety, as I would now rechristen it, really, if the organization itself is, structurally unsafe, excessive workloads, inconsistent leaderships, poor governance, unclear accountabilities? Do you think and these organizations exist, right? And with the whole world moving towards more and more startups today, and I'll come to that later about founder-led organizations. But even in the larger scheme of things, do you think an employee can genuinely be psychologically safe and psychosocially safe? And what really gets into it?
I think it is possible, but it places a huge amount of pressure on the manager. So I've worked with organizations and they have a great manager. It's someone who creates a strong team. People are psychologically safe. They get great feedback. They're accountable. The manager is open and vulnerable, and they trust that person. What happens that people don't want to leave. So because they know that the rest of the organization is not the same. So if they do want to move up, they tend to leave. So the other thing is that the manager quite often can become trapped. So they'll say that person is doing, Susie or Tom or whatever it is doing such a great job down there. We're going to leave them there. So it's a short-term fix. And that's why, unless you have the framework of wider psychosocial safety, then it's not something that's going to be sustainable.
Right. Yes, that's the core. That's at the core of it, right? As what is that framework which makes this entire thing sustainable? And you kept alluding to the term that it is more of a framework. So, would you like to educate us on what you mean by that?
Well, it's broken into three parts, and 3Plus has got a great infographic which I can send you on this, and it's the physical safety, right? And I pulled up. So I'm a bit of a stat nerd, and I like data, so I pulled up a few stats to share with you. So about 68% of employees worldwide don't feel physically safe in their workplace, right? So they go to work and they don't feel safe, whether they're working in a manufacturing environment or a lab environment or a dangerous environment, but sometimes even in an office environment like hospitality, for example. And another 65% connect that to not being able to share their lack of feeling safe with their bosses. So they're they're very connected, and what they see is people taking shortcuts around physical safety. So that's the first piece of it. Then the second piece is the social environment, and it's about having systems in place around leadership style, bullying, harassment, all of these things. And then you've got the organizational, which is about, as you said, multiple restructurings. What else is in that? The leadership, lack of accountability, lack of governance. And what we're seeing was a new layer with AI when and this is why trust is really a very critical element. And I think that's going to be the go-to leadership skill of the next 10 years or whatever. Is that, for example, people don't know if they're being measured with AI. We've just seen that court case with Meta, where people who in protected groups were let go because they were on maternity leave, but their mouse wasn't showing the keystrokes. and so they don't know who to trust, and that is also deeply connected to psychosocial safety and psychological safety.
I'm sure. And when we speak about AI, right? And while that would have come much later in the conversation for me, but since you did bring it up, and since it's so pertinent today, when you talk about emotional safety, even job safety, right? Is my job secure or not, right? Is my manager going to be throwing it at me that, you know what, this is something which AI can do better than you? Or maybe all of it can be done by AI altogether, right? How do I, as an individual, as an employee, protect myself against that? And how do I, as a manager or at an organization level, ensure that that does not become an easy lever to harass or bully people by the sheer threat of it? I mean, there might not be any evidenced data saying that your job is going to be eaten by AI, but it's almost become like a norm today to kind of, just express. And that creates fear, that creates uncertainty, that creates, that fear
Yeah.
of a lack of knowledge. So how do you think, as an individual first, and then at a larger scale, at an organization level, this should be handled?
My honest answer to that is I don't know. Um, and and I don't think anyone else knows either, to
Yes,
be honest.
absolutely.
I mean, they say they know, but I'm
Mm,
not convinced, because what we're seeing is the fire and rehire cycle. So they're
right.
saying, okay, we're laying people off because we use AI, and then they find that they can't do it, so they're bringing them back.
Mm,
I think that
mm,
employee anxiety levels are at an all-time high.
yes.
And I think what's happening now is the employers are
Mm,
not assessing the risks
that's
correctly.
right.
I mean,
That's
certainly in Europe, we have the EU AI Act, which places certain talent management
that's
systems
right.
as high
Mm,
risk.
mm.
And the deadline for that has been deferred. I think
Okay.
sometime in 2027, I think.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but the risk hasn't.
Mm,
So if a group of employees decides to sue an organization, they can
mm.
still be held liable. So I think what's happening is that organizations are not moving fast enough to meet the requirements of all
Right.
of these elements in a workplace landscape which is changing to
Mm,
accommodate AI. And there's been a certain element of move fast and break things,
mm.
and that makes people very insecure. It
Yes.
increases absenteeism, sickness,
Yes, of course.
all of, reduced productivity, all of these things.
Totally.
And leaders need to get on top of that. And truthfully, not many are moving fast enough. Some are, but not everyone. And
No,
it's
I
about
think so.
transparency too. It's about transparency. And because it's such a new world, none of us really are completely sure what's happening, is that they can't be transparent because they don't know.
Yes, I would think so, right? I mean, that's what you started with, that I don't know what's the perfect answer to this question. The fact of the matter is, none of us do, because it's an evolving scenario for us. None of us know the length and breadth of it, right? So even at a managerial level, I sometimes shudder to think that what could he be really doing, right? Because he really doesn't know how does it, because he doesn't know if he's safe enough. So I really wonder if he can sort of, express that in full earnesty to his team members that, hey, okay, this is what AI can do or can't do, because it's an ever evolving scenario, which is where, with a lot of organizations that I work with, a lot of youngsters, they are in this constant state of dilemma and fear, because they don't know what to expect, and that's the worst, really. One is you can prepare yourself for a future risk. Now that's one side of things. The other side of things is when you don't know what to expect and how much it can go and how much not. So yeah, I think ambiguity is something which is real right now, and part of the psychosocial safety that comes with it for organization, as you again mentioned, would have to rest with the leaders as to how much of transparency, with at least how much they know, is what they can express, right? I mean, that could be for a starter, really, but then we really don't know where that goes. many leaders, and you also alluded to that very shortly when you started with your first answer, is many leaders believe psychological safety is being nice, right? Not having crucial conversations, not really addressing performance issues, lest you be called a person who's not sensitive or is not having enough EI and all of that. How do you balance psychological safety with accountability and performance standards?
Once again, I think it's about trust and transparency.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of team charters, and I think that if people have buy-in to a situation, because it varies from one place to another, from one culture, one team. What do we agree on is things that are acceptable and unacceptable to say, and how can we deliver this? And I think if everyone on the team agrees, because a lot of the damage is quite often done in banter and joking, that sort of thing. What is acceptable? So that's on the informal level of the team.
Right.
In terms of the team and the manager level, I think it's about being willing to hear feedback, processing it, because I've been so into the World Cup, to separate the player from the ball. So focus on the issue, not the person.
Yes.
And to give actionable feedback. And that's something particularly women and underrepresented groups struggle with. They don't get actionable feedback. So managers have to really learn to listen, to process, to take time, and then to give actionable feedback. And for me, if you have that combination of the team agreeing amongst themselves of what is acceptable, what isn't, and then the manager and the team agreeing, this is the way we're going to do things, then that is normally effective.
Yeah, and don't you think managers need some serious coaching and mentoring to be able to tell them that what's being nice versus what's being effective, right? Because that's where it really comes from, that you're not effective if you're not having those difficult conversations. But how are you having those difficult conversations is what you really need to learn. What do you think about that? Since you also work with various organizations, what do you think about the how of things?
Well, a lot of people don't like to deliver bad news, right? Or they don't like to do something where they think that person is going to be upset. So I think most managers are not trained to be managers. I mean, the stats on that is horrific.
Oh, yeah.
I think that the minute someone goes into a supervisory position, they should be trained on listening and feedback. Really, really important. The person wants to feel heard. Okay, you raised a point, and there will be good parts of it, and this. So I heard what you said. There's a certain level of value. But this is what we're going to do.
Right.
But it's not dead. We can revisit it, or it might be a terrible idea. But you don't say that's a really terrible idea. We're not
So
even
many
listening
words,
to
of
that.
course.
But okay, well, we hear what you say. You validate that person for contributing, because if you shut them down, they're not going to contribute again. If you shut them down, they're going to tell their colleagues, yeah, there's no point. And then eventually you get a stagnant organization. But if you get the conversation, the dialogue, and the person feels recognized and valued for making that contribution, then that is a game changer.
No, that's a wonderful approach and a suggestion, really, especially for the younger audience that's listening to this. The other thing which I really wanted to talk about is, like I mentioned in the beginning, that today the world is moving towards startup-led organizations, right? Very young, very bright minds, they're coming together, building organizations. But there comes a slump, right? So their strategy is brilliant. They are exceptional performers. Their business results look very strong, but they run pretty immature leadership systems. How do you think they can groom themselves, or they can empower themselves to make it as a part of the process. It's not a separate agenda, right? It has to be a part of the process. So while they're building these organizations and doing really great at it, how do they also build mature leadership systems?
That is tough. I've actually worked in a startup, which, and I think actually that there is, in my experience, not in the one that I have myself, but working with others, is that there is, to a certain point, really strong psychological safety within that. It's a small team. People say, excuse me, say what they want. Sometimes it's not always as constructive as it might be. But then what happens? It scales.
Yes, exactly.
And there is a gap then between the founders and the people. So they're taking on people. Quite often they're just hiring without thought.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden the team of 5 or 6 is now 30, then it's 80 or whatever it is. And you find that the decisions are being taken quite often without a structure, that there is a focus on delivery and P&L, which is normal.
Absolutely.
They quite often bring in an HR person too late.
Too late, mostly.
And
yes.
Usually, or they think that things will like handle themselves, or quite often they give it to an executive assistant or something. But then what you see then is decisions made behind closed doors with the founders, or they don't involve the hierarchy. There might, and then you'll start to see people leave because they feel excluded. So for founders, I think really think about the people piece first. At the same time as P&L, because without your people, you don't have P&L, or you might not have the P, you might have the L. So it's about treating people as a priority, and throughout all. I mean, you probably hear my message. It's all about trust, transparency, accountability. So whether or not you're a big corporate or a team or a small startup, it's all about that, and getting people on side and agreeing your values and your norms really, really early.
Yes, I think that's a very critical one, Dorothy, that are you working on how you want to run the organization basis a value system, right? Are you getting your vision and your values in place pretty early on and not waiting for things to fall apart and then you say, oh, hey, I did not really think on this and let me get this together, because the damage is done. It's both reputational and it's also kind of impacting your P&L in a certain way. You're hiring wrong kind of people. They're not blending into your culture because you've not tested them for the values, right? That's not what you've evaluated. So yes. So what you're really recommending is that, start early as you're building an organization. Start early on the things that matter, which is how are you going to be people-centric? What are the values you bring on the table? And of course, get an HR on time. I think that's the very important piece.
And if I could just add one thing in there, I think what I've seen happens is that startups play favorites. They quite often, and they bring on their buddies. They bring on their buddies or their family members or whatever. And then once they start doing that, then you'll start to see a certain erosion of credibility. So it's all of those things. And if they take it, if you like, an HR perspective earlier, they can start to have better hiring systems.
I agree.
Rather than hiring your cousin or I don't know, your neighbor's daughter or whatever.
No, absolutely. And I've also found this in starter-led companies, Dorothy, and you could share your perspective as well. When they actually start up, really, they have a common set of values because they're fewer in number, right? As they keep growing, and there are certain behaviors that they demonstrate because they're fewer in number. There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of zeal for doing whatever you're doing. So it's a different microculture which is built between those founders and the core team members. As the team starts growing, they would imagine that people who are coming in are sharing those core values and are sharing that zeal and enthusiasm. What they fail to recognize is that you're hiring not basis your values or behaviors. You're hiring basis their potential and competencies, right? So when you're really evaluating them. So do you think they can do something? And since you have a very, very dynamic, sort of experience in executive search. How do you think they should look at recruiting right? Especially, I'm really being micro here and talking about these startup-led organizations. What is that hiring strategy that would really work well for them?
Once again, I think it will vary from one organization to another, and I've seen different people try different things. I mean, some people just put an ad and they see what comes in. Other people put a video out on LinkedIn. And Stephen Bartlett, you've probably heard of him, the podcaster. He just put out, we're hiring. I don't care what qualifications, just send your CV. I guarantee we'll read it. So I think this is once again an area where people are trying and testing. So, and finding out what works. They want to see what's out there. They want to see what talent is there. Quite often people are using referral systems. And then once again, that leads to a lot of confirmation bias.
Yes.
Where they're going back to their old business schools or their old, university or whatever. And so then they're not getting the diversity. So I think once again, people are just trying different things to see what sticks. And certainly what we're seeing in the recruitment business, that with AI, and particularly where you have these amplifying platforms where, a candidate can post a CV on a website at the weekend and an app will apply to 5,000 jobs for you. I mean, what recruiters are seeing is that certainly the last search I did, I forget the figure, I think it was 86% were unqualified. So I mean,
that's a number. That's a number
it's massive, and it was for a job which required Cantonese, right? And it was an engineering job running a manufacturing plant, but I was getting CVs from short order cooks because they just saw who worked in Chinese restaurants and they just saw Cantonese and then
they just saw Cantonese.
Yeah. So I think that once again we're living in a very experimental age, I think, and some people find that unnerving because it means having to let go everything we knew and did before and start experimenting with new stuff, and we don't know what will work and what won't. And I think in navigating that uncertainty, as you say, ambiguity is going to be critical. To leading correctly and effectively going forward.
I so agree. I couldn't agree more, really. I mean, ambiguity seems to be the only constant we're dwelling in today, isn't it? Let's move on this. So 5 years ahead, right? What do you think, or maybe 10 years ahead, whatever we can think of, 10 years might be too long a time. 5 years, looking ahead from now, what do you think will distinguish organizations that are sort of just merely talking about safety, doing the optics right, and, getting all those tick marks, from those that genuinely build cultures where, innovation, well-being, performance, etc., they're reinforcing one another? What would be those key top two differentiators, really?
I think, I mean, to be honest, I mean, even 5 years is a lot today.
I do agree. I do. I realized as I was saying that 5 years, I really don't know what's going to evolve in 5 years. So let's say, okay, in the recent future.
Well, let's say 3 to 5. I mean, for me, one of the things that I think people need to do is to start treating psychosocial safety and psychosocial risk in the same way as they would treat financial and legal risk. I don't think people are treating it seriously enough. And what's going to happen is that the legislation is going to increase. And I just want to loop back because I didn't really answer that question properly, I don't think, when you asked about what advice would you give to individuals. I think in the age of AI, what we need to do is to make sure that there's equity of upskilling and access to AI. And I think organizations need to do
So
that.
critical. Yes.
And so the piece for the individual is make sure that you don't get left behind. Because if you get left behind, that is not going to be good. And the second thing is for organizations and individuals is to really work on your people skills. And so it's not a question of, just focusing on hard skills, but really I would use the term continually curious, to really learn. And for your founders in your startup, they should be continuous learners and continuous improvement,
Absolutely.
constantly thinking, how can I treat and do better with my people? Because if I treat my people better, my P&L will be better.
No, so well put, Dorothy. Couldn't agree more. My last question, and this is sort of a culmination for the excellent conversation we've been having, and I wish I could go longer. So if you were to leave us with a top of mind recall on psychosocial safety, what would that be? What is it that should constantly be reiterated us as HR leaders, organizational leaders, founders? What is that top thing that you would want us to retain when we think psychosocial safety?
I think the most important thing is to find out what's going on in your organizations, because my experience is that if it's not reported, it's not happening. And I see that very much in the area of harassment and bullying, that sort of thing, where I have coached personally people from that company and have had these issues. And I've contacted the CHRO and I said, I think you need some sort of training on this, or inquiry or survey. And we got no reports. Well, the most important thing is to get your data. And then when you get your data, you know what's going on in your organization, then you can make decisions. So really start talking to your people, however you do it, find out what's going on for them, and then you can start to make informed decisions instead of just guessing.
Yes, I mean, that's a very cogent point. Half the times, things are not reaching to the people who can really make a change, right? Or who can really do something about it. And it's lingering at various levels, either due to fear or due to reluctance, whatever that sentiment might be behind it. So yes, I think that's a very cogent advice to people leading from the top, that know your people, know your organization, know what's going on, really. Whatever tools you might need, whatever, however you might want to do it, but get knowing. So I think knowledge can be a huge empowerment for leaders in order for them to know what they need to do ahead. Wonderful. I mean, Dorothy, it was an absolute pleasure, getting these knowledge nuggets from you, from your vast experience.
It was my pleasure.
And it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. It was delightful. Thank you so much for accepting to do this for us.